Welcome to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all of our fifth graders out there, although anybody can participate and tune in. This lesson is the fourth in our series for this week. My name is Ms. Thompson, and I'm a fifth grade teacher at Venus Stewart Elementary in Gallatin, Tennessee. Welcome to our virtual classroom. If you haven't seen any of the previous lessons, you can find them at the website www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune into today's lesson, even if you haven't seen our others, but it might be more fun if you go back and watch our other lessons, since we'll be talking about things that we learned previously. Today, we're going to be learning again about a very exciting baseball game. But before we get started, as always, to participate fully in our lesson today, please get the following items. You need 2 pieces of paper, a surface to write on, a paper or a pencil. You need a marker or a highlighter. And you also need the student packet for ELA grade 5, lesson 14. I have it here, and that can be found on the website www.tn.gov/education. It looks like this, grade 5, lesson 14. Casey at the back. I'll give you a few minutes to get prepared for our lesson today. Today, we're going to be taking another look at the poem Casey at the Bat by Ernest Lawrence Taylor. In this lesson, we're going to be focusing on the author's point of view. Now, I'm going to write at the top, our goal or our focus is author's point of view. I put POV just to make point of view shorter. So anytime I say POV, that means point of view. That's our goal for our reading today, or our objective for our reading. Point of view is the perspective or attitude the author has towards a topic. I bet you already know a lot about point of view and perspective. You've probably learned it this year in your classroom. In the last lesson, you were tasked with the retelling of the events of the poem from the perspective of Casey, who is a baseball player, or from the perspective of a fan who's watching the game. Do you think that Casey's point of view might be different from a fan's point of view? Yes, I think they're very, very different. Let's think about it a bit deeper, though. At the end of a sports game, there's almost always a team that wins and always a team that loses. Even though both teams were at the same game, I bet they had a different perspective on how the game went, or attitude about how the game went. Think about a time where you either won or lost a game. How did your point of view change based on whether you won or lost? Let me show you a few pictures of some athletes, and you try to think of words that might describe their point of view at the end of the game. Remember, these pictures are from the end of the game. Think of words and phrases that describe their point of view. Look at this image. How would you describe these players' point of view or perspective or attitude in this photo? Yes, I think you're right. They lost the game. You can tell by their body language or just how sad they look. Some words that would describe these players are what? Disappointed, frustrated, unhappy, mad, angry, sad, all of these things. Now, look at the difference here. What about this picture? How would you describe the point of view of the athletes here? Yes, I think they won. Very, very different from the picture from before. You can tell by how happy and excited they are. The banner in the back says winners. That helps us too. Some words that would describe all these players are joyful, smiling, excited, or happy. Now, in the poem Casey at the Bat, the author has a very specific point of view that influences how we read the poem. Today, while you read, we'll look at how the author's word choice gives us clues to better understand the author's point of view and how that perspective might have changed in the events if the poem were different. At the end of today's lesson, you'll have to rewrite the last 2 stanzas. Remember, we talked about stanzas. It's what poems are made up of. It's groups of lines. In your writing, you will show how the author might have written the poem if Casey had hit a home run at the end. So you're going to rewrite the ending as if he had hit the home run. Pay close attention to how the poem is written so you can write an ending that rhymes and has really good descriptive language. Let's get started. Now, today as we read, we're going to be taking some notes together on your paper. So to begin, let's write a header at the top of our notes. We're not going to do a T-chart. We're just going to write some notes and then use bullet points. So go ahead and in capital letters at the top of your page, write point of view notes. I have it here. Point of view notes. Now, below the header, we're going to be using bullet points to write down some notes. At the end of our reading, we'll put all of our thoughts together to help prepare for your independent practice at the end of the lesson. Remember, our focus today is author's point of view. And I'll always write my focus at the top of my text because I'm always keeping it in the back of my mind every time. We'll use what we learned today to rewrite the last two stanzas to reflect on an alternative ending. Now let's get started. The outlook, I'm in stanza 1, and just like always, guys, what do I always do? I always number 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. I always number my stanzas all the time and always write my goal or my focus for the read today. I'm starting on stanza 1. The outlook wasn't bright for the Mudville 9 that day. The score stood 4-6 with just an inning left to play. And so when Cooney died at first and Burroughs did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A straggling few got up to go, leaving the rest, with a hope that springs eternal within the human breast. For they thought if only Casey could get one whack at that, they'd put up even money with Casey at the bat. Now, you might remember there are different points of view, such as first person, second person, and third person. Can you tell what point of view the author uses in this poem? First person, second person, or third person? If you said third person, you're correct. Great job. But how do we know it's written in third person point of view? How do we know that someone else is telling us this story? Casey's not telling us the story. The fans aren't telling us this story. Someone from outside looking in is telling us this story. I know that this poem is written in third person because the narrator is not in the story. The narrator is describing things such as the fans and the baseball players. I don't see any words like I, me, we, or my. I see words like they. I see words like Cooney and Burroughs. That tells me that he's using their names. And I see words like Casey. Casey is not telling us the story. So on our notes, our point of view notes, I want you to write third person point of view. This will help you to write in third person when you rewrite the last few stanzas on your own as your independent practice. We want to make sure that you talk about the other characters and not just yourself. So write down third person point of view, or POV. It's just a shorter way to write it. I'm moving on. I'm in stanza 3. But Flynn preceded Casey, and so likewise did Blake. But the former was the pudding, and the latter was the fake. So on the stricken multitude a death-like silence sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. Let's look at this stanza, stanza 3. We get an idea of how the author views the players Flynn and Blake. How does the author feel about these players? And remember, he uses certain words. If you said the author doesn't really think they're good baseball players, you're correct. We know this because he uses words like pudding, ladder was a fake, and remember in our very first lesson, we looked at those challenging vocabulary words. Those aren't good descriptions for players that are about to bat. So I want us to make a note, and in your next bullet point, he doesn't think that Flynn and Blake are good baseball players. Let's write that down. Remember, this is the author's point of view. Casey doesn't think they're not good. The fans don't think they're not good. It's the author because he uses those words and phrases. Does not think Flynn and Blake are good baseball players. Stanza 4, excuse me. But Flynn let drive a single wonderment to the wonderment of all, and the much despised Blake tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and they saw what had occurred, there was Blake safe on second and Flynn a hugging third. Next stanza, 5. Remember, wonderment was in our first lesson, those challenging words. And in stanza 5, we're going to hit another challenging word that we learned in the vocabulary lesson. Stanza 5. Then from the glad and multitude went up a joyous yell. It bounded from the mountaintop and rattled in the dell. It struck upon the hillside and rebounded on the flat. For Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. Now, in these stanzas, these two stanzas that we just read, something really, really unexpected happens, right? Flynn and Blake actually do well, and Casey actually gets the chance to bat. Because the author's point of view on these players in earlier stanzas, you might have thought they would have done poorly. Because remember, he says they weren't that good. But even to us as the reader, we were kind of surprised. Do you think the author did that on purpose? I think so. We'll see if we can get a more definitive answer as we keep reading. But first, let me ask you a question. What do you think the author's point of view of Casey is? Look at this. It says, mighty Casey was advancing to the bat. I think that the author probably thinks Casey is a really, really, really good baseball player. I want to go ahead and just highlight that word, mighty. He uses that word to describe him, so I know that the author thinks he's probably a good baseball player. I'm going to add that to my point of view notes. Remember, who is telling us the story? It's not Casey. It's not the fans. It's not one of the players we read about. It's the author. He thinks the first two players are not very good, but he does think that Casey is a pretty good baseball player based on that word mighty. Go ahead and write that down. Thinks Casey is a good baseball player. I'm going to keep going. I'm on stanza 6. There was an ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was a pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And when, responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat, no stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. In this stanza, the author is simply describing what is happening. Notice the line, there was an ease in Casey's manner as he stepped onto the plate. There was an ease in Casey's manner as he stepped onto the plate. I'm going to highlight that. There was an ease in his manner as he stepped onto his place. What message is the author trying to tell us here? What message? Remember, word choice matters. Descriptive word choice really matters. So when the author uses words like ease to describe Casey's manner, we know that he is calm, right? Most people would probably feel a lot of pressure in that moment, but guess who doesn't? Casey. Remember, his team's losing and he's got people on base. Now, as we read, pay close attention to how the author uses certain words to make a point. Stanza 7. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then, while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance glanced in Casey's eyes. A sneer curled Casey's lip. Now, up until this point, what characters has the author focused his attention on? That's right. The author focuses almost all of his attention on the fans and the Mudville players, especially Casey. I think it's important detail, so let's write that on our notes. I want to write down that the author really focuses on the Mudville players and the fans. So write that down on your next bullet point. Focuses, there's a focus, on the Mudville players and the fans. Focus on the Mudville players and the fans. Now, that brings me to a next really good question that I'm wondering about. Why do you think the author hasn't focused on the other team? He's just focusing on the Mudville team. Maybe the author wants us to focus on the Mudville team and the Mudville fans because that's where the theme of the poem is. Remember, theme means message or lesson that the author is trying to reveal. As we read, think about what lesson the author is trying to express, or maybe what lesson he wants us to learn as we continue to read. I'm on stanza 8. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded speed. That ain't my style, said Casey. Strike one, the umpire said. From the benches, black with people, there went up a muffled roar like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. Kill him! Kill the umpire, shouted someone in the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had Casey not raised his hand. Now, some interesting things happen in these two stanzas. Can you name them? Let's see if you're right. Casey let the first strike go without swinging. That doesn't seem like a very good idea. And two, the fans get really angry at the umpire so much that they yell, kill him. The poem even goes on to say it's likely they'd have killed him if he hadn't raised his hand. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. Now, this seems like an overreaction. Do you think the fans would have really killed the umpire? Of course not. No. This is just an example of how the author uses an exaggeration to explain how enthusiastic or how excited the fans were. The fact that the author exaggerates is another note we need to add to our point of view notes. So for your fifth point, I want you to write down exaggerates. I want you to write down exaggerates, and you're going to spell it E-X-A-G-G-E-R-A-T-E-S. He exaggerates, right? Because he really wants us to get that point across. He exaggerates. Nobody's killing the umpire. Let's keep reading. Stanza 10. Check that stanza off. I've already analyzed and close read that one. Number 10. With a smile of Christian charity great, Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the sphere flew. But Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, strike two. Fraud, cried the maddened thousands. Stanza 11. And he echoed, answered, fraud. With a scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain. And they knew that Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again. What effect does Casey have on the fans? Casey seems very much like a leader or almost a hero. He's able to calm the fans down even when they're getting angry. Do you think it was a good idea for Casey not to swing the first two pitches? I agree. Casey might be a confident and good leader, but he shouldn't think too highly of himself. Let's pay close attention to the last two stanzas. These two. These are the ones that you will rewrite. You will rewrite these two stanzas. Last two. In order to create an alternative ending. In this next stanza, focus on the rhyme scheme. Ooh, that's a tough one. Rhyme scheme. The sneer is gone from Casey's lips. His teeth are clenched with hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. What is rhyme scheme? Rhyme scheme is the pattern that a rhyme makes. You may have noticed that the first and second lines rhyme. See, hate and plate, go and blow. The third and fourth line. The pattern that the author uses in this poem is AABB, meaning in a stanza, lines with 4 lines on the first 2 lines will rhyme with the same sound as the last 2 lines will rhyme with another sound. Lines 1 and 2, lines 3 and 4. So it goes AABB, hate plate, go blow. Those words rhyme. This might be helpful on your notes. Let's go ahead and add it. AABB. On to the last stanza. Now remember, guys, you are rewriting these as your own independent practice. You're rewriting them as your own independent practice. Let's get to the last one. Somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. Now, did you notice the difference between the first 3 lines of the last stanza and the last line? Let's think about this a little bit more. I'm going to reread the first 3 lines from the stanza, and I want you to visualize this scene. Are you ready? Close your eyes and just visualize it. Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. Now, what did you visualize from those three lines? I want you to draw what you visualized. The sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere. Hearts are light. Men are laughing. Children are shouting out. I want you to draw that, what you visualize. What do you visualize? Or what words would you say really do a good job of explaining that? You should have drawn maybe the sun shining. You should have drawn children laughing or shouting and men laughing. Hearts are light. You should draw maybe bands or music playing. And what do all those tell us? That people are what? That people are happy. That people are happy. That's the sense I get from that. And then all of a sudden, the last line is very, very different. We get 3 lines of happiness. And then the last line. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. Look at that. Do you think this is a happy line? No, of course not. There is no joy. Look how different that is from the first three lines of that stanza. And it also says that Casey struck out. We know Mudville lost, and we know the fans are very, very sad. Why do you think the author chose to write the last stanza this way? Look at this. He tells us that we know he's about to hit the ball. And then all of a sudden we get this sense of happiness and excitement, and things are really looking up. And then all of a sudden just one line really brings that poem back down. Now, it seems that the author wanted to create a surprise ending. And he does that by using specific word choices. He first describes a happy scene to make us think that the Mudville fans are happy and that Casey won the game. But then in one line, he tells us that Casey struck out. The surprise ending is really going to help us as we talk about theme. So let's think about this as we go over our notes. Okay, we've got a lot of notes here. Point of view notes. Third person point of view, right? Doesn't think Flynn and Blake are good baseball players. He thinks Casey's the good baseball player. Focuses on the Mudville fans and the players. He exaggerates, uses the rhyme scheme, AABB. Let's add one more. Let's add surprise ending. Wow, lots of notes on point of view. Now, I would like for us to take a second to put all of our thoughts together and think about the author's point of view. I want you to answer 2 questions, just 2. 1, how would you describe the author's point of view? How would you describe the author's point of view? And 2, how did the author's point of view influence how a reader might understand this poem? How did the author's point of view on Mudville, the fans, Casey, the ending, how did the author's point of view influence or have an effect on how we might understand this poem? Now, just below your notes down here, do a quick write in paragraph form to answer those questions and use your notes to guide you. I'm going to do mine. I've typed mine up while you do yours. Use your notes to help you write in paragraph form to answer those questions. I'll give you a few seconds. I bet you're on the right track. Pause the video if you need to. Let me show you my answer. I just quickly typed out and printed right before our lesson this. The author tells the poem from a third person point of view. Remember, someone from the outside looking in, not someone in the story. Focusing on the Mudville players and the Mudville fans. The authors sometimes use exaggerated descriptions to explain the emotions of the fans and the events that occur. At the end, the author uses specific word choice to create a surprise ending that is shocking to the readers who expected Casey to hit the ball. Did you write something similar? With all that in mind, what do you think the theme of the poem is? I think it might be don't be overly confident. That's what I think it might be. Do you think the author's point of view helped reveal this theme or show us this theme? Do you think the author's point of view of Casey and the fans helped express this theme? And remember, theme, the lesson, moral, or message the author wants us to learn. What about that surprise ending? Why do you think the author wanted us to be surprised? Can we learn something from the surprise ending? I bet we can. They're all great questions to get us thinking about the impact a point of view can have on a story or a poem in this situation. But do you think the author's point of view would be different if Casey had hit a home run? Huh. This poem could be totally different if he had actually hit a home run and won the game. That's what I want you to write about today. I think you're ready to go. Now, here's your independent work. You have done an outstanding job today, as always. And now I have a challenge for you. I'm going to ask you to do this task for your lesson. Be sure to write down all the directions I give you. Okay? I want you to write an alternative ending for the poem. That means that you will rewrite the last two stanzas. And remember, guys, the last two stanzas, I made a note about which ones you're rewriting right here. That means you'll rewrite the last two stanzas, 4 lines in each, 8 lines in total, to show what it would have been like if Casey had hit a home run, right? Remember, we're working in stanzas. Each stanza has 4 lines. You're writing 2 stanzas, so that's going to be a total of 8 lines, 4 lines in each stanza. I want your poem to reflect the author's point of view and voice. So use your notes to think about how you should write this alternative ending. Remember, alternative means different. I want you to really think about these. Use third-person point of view. Focus on Casey and the fans. Use good word choice. Exaggerate to get your point across, and use the same rhyme scheme that the author used. You've done a really great job this week using descriptive paragraphs and narrative. Now it's time to get to writing a poem. Now I'm going to repeat it. Your independent practice for today is to rewrite the last 2 stanzas, not the whole poem, just 2, to show what it would have been like if Casey had actually hit a home run. Each stanza should have 4 lines using the AABB rhyme scheme. So in total today, you'll be writing just 8 lines, 2 stanzas, 4 lines apiece. Make sure you keep your work because you're going to want it for our final lesson this week. Here's your practice. Pause the video if you need to. As always, I enjoyed working on this narrative poem, Casey at the Bat, with you today. I can't wait to hear all about your alternative ending when Casey actually hits the home run. As always, thank you for inviting me into your home today. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson at Tennessee's At Home Learning Series. Have a good day.